In the middle of a supermarket aisle, a child's hand formed a gesture so subtle most would miss it. Palm out, thumb tucked, fingers folding across. A silent distress signal that could mean everything or nothing, depending on who saw it. Rex, a trained German shepherd on routine patrol, froze at that moment. His handler, Officer Marcus, paused too, noticing his dog's rigid body and unblinking stare. To ordinary shoppers, it was just a little girl holding a teddy bear. But to Rex, it was more. Something in that instant, her posture, the tension in her small frame, the quiet plea stitched into her movement, locked him in place. Sometimes the smallest motions are the loudest cries. Sometimes the world rushes on, blind. But Rex did not blink, and what he saw in that cereal aisle would change everything for the child, for her family, and for himself. Officer Marcus had walked the aisles of Brookage's only supermarket countless times. Most days, Rex received pats from children, smiles from parents, and the occasional curious glance. The sleepy town rarely produced incidents worth noting, making these patrols routine and uneventful. Yet on that day, Rex broke the pattern. His body stiffened, ears pricked, gaze locked on a 5-year-old girl gripping a teddy bear worn down to threads. The German shepherd wasn't reacting to noise, movement, or scent alone. He was reading fear. Marcus knew his partner well. This wasn't random curiosity. It was recognition of something unseen by human eyes. The handler's pulse quickened. Law required reports, evidence, or complaints to act. But dogs like Rex didn't read law. They read truth. And the truth was clear in Rex's posture. The girl was signaling distress, not with words, but with silence. It was enough to turn ordinary patrol into extraordinary intervention.
The girl, later identified as Lily, looked younger than her age, 5 years shaped by worry instead of play. Dirt smudged her pink dress, her hair tangled and unkempt. She held the teddy bear so tightly one ear seemed permanently flattened. Beside her stood Dante Briggs, tall, tattooed, and strangely composed, as though choosing cereal was the only thing that mattered. He appeared calm, almost detached, but Rex's instincts pointed elsewhere. The dog's low growl was not aggression, it was a signal, a warning that something beneath the surface was dangerously wrong. Marcus studied the pair. The man guided the child with a hand resting too firmly on her back. The girl's eyes remained downcast, fixed on the floor tiles. What struck Marcus most was her stillness. Children moved, tugged, wandered. Lily didn't. And in that unnatural quiet, Rex read a message loud and clear. She needed help. For Officer Marcus, the conflict was immediate. On paper, nothing was wrong. There was no screaming, no bruises visible, no evidence of crime. By the book, he had nothing. No grounds to act, no report to file. But Rex wasn't moving. The German shepherd's gaze stayed glued to the little girl, every muscle alert, every instinct shouting. Marcus trusted his partner's senses as much as his own. Years of working together had taught him a truth. Dogs see what humans overlook. Still, instincts don't hold up in court. The handler's mind raced through protocols while his heart urged action. It was a familiar battle between paperwork and gut. The world might walk past without seeing, but Marcus knew one thing: Rex had never been wrong before. And if his dog was frozen in place, then something, somewhere, was deeply out of place. Instinct was demanding attention, evidence or not.
At checkout, the cashier smiled at Lily, remarking on her teddy bear. For the briefest instant, her face flickered with light, almost responding. Then Dante's hand pressed against her back, and she retreated inward again. They paid in cash and left without conversation. Outside, the blue sedan rolled away. Marcus noted the license plate, the make, and the direction. Rex pressed against the sliding glass doors, watching the car vanish. Every part of the dog's body signaled resistance, as if letting the girl leave was betrayal. Marcus tugged gently on the leash, promising silently this wasn't over. He scribbled the information down, committing the details to memory. In small towns like Brookridge, too much silence often went unnoticed. But silence carried weight, and Marcus had learned to measure it carefully. He looked down at Rex, who still stared through the glass. The case had already begun. Marcus parked at a gas station across from Sunset Manor, the tired apartment complex where the blue sedan disappeared. Rex sat alert in the passenger seat, eyes fixed on the second-floor windows. Time passed slowly. 10 minutes stretched into 30. Then, in the narrow bend of a broken blind, Lily's pale face appeared. She held the bear to her chest, her small eyes scanning the world beyond. She wasn't waving, wasn't moving, just watching. It was the gaze of a child waiting to be seen. Marcus lifted his notepad and marked down Unit 2B. He didn't approach. Without reason, a knock could be dismissed, even punished. But now he had something stronger than instinct. A child too silent, too still, too watchful. The thin slit of the blinds had revealed more than a room. It revealed a soul caught in quiet desperation, holding out for rescue.
That night, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, body cam footage playing back frame by frame. The glow from the screen lit his face as he froze the moment that haunted him, the tiny hand curling inward. He watched it again, then again. This wasn't chance or coincidence. It was deliberate, a plea encoded in motion. He flipped through his notes on child distress signals, those subtle movements taught in training sessions but often overlooked in practice. Rarely did officers ever see one firsthand. He pressed pause, staring at the screen. Rex lay nearby, head lifting at the sound of the click. "You saw it first," Marcus whispered, though his words carried more to himself than the dog. On the notepad, in hurried writing, he underlined one sentence: "Don't let this be an almost." He knew what almost meant in police work. Almost helped, almost saved. Not this time. The following day, Marcus climbed the cracked stairwell of Sunset Manor with Rex at his side. He stopped at Unit 2B and knocked firmly. The chain slid but didn't release. Dante appeared in the gap. Up close, he looked worn, older than before. Stubble across his jaw, arms crossed defensively. Behind him, Marcus glimpsed a couch, a flickering television, walls bare of any color. What he didn't see was more telling. No toys, no drawings, no sound of a child at play. Dante leaned against the frame, his voice flat, claiming Lily was asleep. He didn't unhook the chain. Marcus offered a card, his face calm though his mind ran hot. The door shut with finality. Rex pressed his nose to the air, body tense. Marcus felt it too. The emptiness inside that apartment was too loud to ignore. Silence, again, was speaking louder than words.
Later that evening, in the town's small diner, Marcus overheard two older women talking by the window. Their voices carried with familiarity, not suspicion. They spoke about a little blonde girl seen at the laundromat days earlier, clinging to her teddy bear, sitting motionless beside Dante. She hadn't spoken, hadn't moved. One woman mentioned she'd taught kindergarten for 30 years. She knew what a child shutting down looked like. Marcus approached politely, noting the details. The girl had been seen more than once, always silent, always still. He thanked them, but inside, his resolve hardened. Silence wasn't limited to the apartment. It followed her wherever she went. Marcus returned home with Rex, spreading his notes across the table. The pieces were aligning into a troubling picture, a child present yet absent in every way that mattered. Silence was following her like a shadow, and shadows rarely meant safety. The next morning, Marcus returned to Sunset Manor under the guise of a casual patrol. Rex tugged toward the complex dumpster, nose twitching with urgency. Marcus lifted the lid with a pen, bracing for nothing. Instead, he found a half-burned photograph. The edges curled and blackened, but the image remained, a smiling woman holding Lily in her arms. Beneath it, crumpled paper with a child's drawing,
Stick figures of a girl and another shape looming in red, scribbled eyes drawn larger than the rest. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Photos are burned to erase, drawings discarded when they reveal too much. He slipped the evidence into a folder. Rex pawed the concrete once, as if insisting Marcus take it seriously. Who destroys family pictures in fire and leaves behind eyes scrawled in anger? Silence had become louder. Now it had smoke, ashes, and crayon warnings to prove it.
Marcus ran Dante's name quietly through records. The truth surfaced quickly. Dante was on probation, not for violence but for theft. He had every reason to avoid the police. His guarded doorway, his evasive responses, they weren't signs of parental control, but of fear of exposure. He wasn't hiding a kidnapping, he was hiding himself. Yet that didn't mean Lily was safe. A man afraid of police might not seek help for a child. Silence can be dangerous, not only for victims, but for guardians bound by fear. Marcus noted this carefully. It explained Dante's demeanor, but didn't absolve him of suspicion. Rex still wouldn't let go. To the dog, silence wasn't safety, it was danger disguised. Marcus understood now that Dante's secret was part of the puzzle, but not the answer. Probation was fear of authority, not proof of care. Lily still wasn't safe enough. Marcus reached out to Child Protective Services. Only one worker agreed to step in. No team, no backup, just calm authority and a clipboard. She moved without drama, blending professionalism with compassion. The plan was simple, a quiet welfare visit, no confrontation, just eyes on Lily. Marcus and Rex stayed back, waiting by the stairwell as minutes stretched heavy. 10, 15, 20 minutes passed before she reappeared. Her face calm, her voice steady, but her eyes told a story. Lily was underfed, withdrawn, quiet in ways children should never be. Nothing obvious, nothing that screamed immediate danger, but enough to matter. Marcus clenched his jaw. It wasn't evidence for court, but it was fuel for action. Rex sat at his feet, ears pricked, gaze still aimed at Unit 2B. Sometimes silence is subtle enough to slip past rules, but never subtle enough to fool a dog.
While the CPS workers sat inside Dante's apartment, Marcus and Rex waited in the hallway. The stillness was suffocating. The sound of a television drifted faintly, nothing more. Rex's nose twitched, his body shifting with restless awareness. Marcus stared at the apartment door, every tick of his watch echoing in his ears. Time stretches differently when you're waiting for the safety of a child. When the worker finally emerged, she carried no photographs, no injuries documented, no visible harm to present. Yet she spoke of a child too quiet, too thin, too detached. None of it met the threshold for legal removal, but all of it whispered risk. Marcus scribbled notes furiously, capturing impressions that law couldn't measure. Rex pressed against his leg, eyes never leaving the apartment building. Sometimes what you don't see is louder than what you do. And Rex had already seen enough. The CPS worker returned to her office, filing for a formal welfare check. Marcus waited by his cruiser, Rex in the passenger seat, eyes glued to the apartment building. Paperwork moved slowly, but instinct was immediate. Still, the system required signatures. Marcus knew the frustration of waiting while danger lingered, but he also knew stepping outside the law could cost a case everything. By evening, the authorization came through, a court-ordered welfare check on Lily. This time, knocking wouldn't be a request, it would be a mandate. Marcus clipped Rex's leash with steady hands, his partner's body taut with anticipation. The threshold moment was coming. Compassion would lead, but compliance would open doors. They weren't simply waiting anymore. They were preparing to act. Silence would no longer be able to hide behind locked chains and half-burned photographs. The door would open, and the truth would step out. Back at Unit 2B, Marcus and the CPS worker approached with papers in hand. Dante's eyes flickered between them and the dog, calculating his choices. He hesitated, fingers tapping the frame, but the court's authority was clear. Slowly, the chain slid, and the door opened wider. Inside, the apartment looked sparse as ever, but one detail struck Marcus's attention: a pair of tiny sneakers by the mat. Proof of a child's presence, proof that silence wasn't misinterpretation. Rex pressed forward, alert but controlled, nose twitching. The air carried more than dust and detergent. It carried the scent of tension, fear, and a child who hadn't spoken freely in weeks. Marcus felt his pulse thrum. This was no longer suspicion, it was reality. The line between waiting and acting had vanished. The threshold had been crossed, literally and legally. Whatever came next would decide Lily's future. Inside the apartment, the CPS worker led the way, while Marcus remained near the door, Rex steady by his side. The worker knelt softly in a dimly lit bedroom. There sat Lily, cross-legged on a faded rug, teddy bear pressed to her chest. Her voice, when it finally emerged, was no louder than a whisper. She said the dog had seen her. Those words, faint as they were, carried the weight of survival. Children don't always trust adults, but animals offer a safer bridge. Rex's amber eyes met hers, and in that silent exchange, trust was given without question. It wasn't paperwork, it wasn't evidence, it was connection, and connection mattered. Marcus knew they had reached her, even if just for a moment. Silence had cracked open slightly, enough to prove what instinct already screamed. Lily was not safe in this apartment. She had asked to be seen.
With the welfare check complete, the CPS worker made the call: temporary protective custody. Lily would not stay in Unit 2B. Marcus watched as Dante's shoulders slumped, his fight drained not by force, but by inevitability. There were no handcuffs, no raised voices. This wasn't an arrest, it was an extraction with dignity. Dante wasn't painted as a monster in that moment, only as a man drowning under circumstances and silence. Yet Marcus couldn't ignore what mattered most. Lily was leaving. Rex stayed close as she stepped past the threshold, her tiny sneakers squeaking against the hallway tile. She clutched Mr. Buttons tighter than ever, the bear now carrying more than stuffing. It carried survival. Silence had given way to motion, and for the first time, Lily was moving towards safety. The system had answered, not perfectly, but in time, and sometimes that was enough. Hours later, the CPS worker contacted Marcus with news that shifted the entire narrative. Lily's mother wasn't missing. She wasn't absent by choice. She was alive, hiding in a domestic violence shelter 2 counties away, registered under a different name. Fear had forced her into anonymity. Her abuser's threats were severe enough that she abandoned her identity to survive. That was why searches revealed nothing. She had become someone else. To protect Lily, she had cut herself out of the system entirely. Marcus sat with the news, staring at Rex curled at his feet. Silence had layers. Lily's wasn't the only one. Her mother's silence had been built from terror, each step hidden in shadows to avoid being traced. What looked like abandonment was sacrifice. The story was no longer just about a girl unseen. It was about a mother fighting to exist safely in silence.
At the shelter, the air carried faint notes of lavender and warm bread, masking the heaviness within. Marcus entered quietly with Rex at his side. Across the room, a woman stood near a window, shoulders bent, hair tied back loosely. When Rex approached, he rested his head gently against her knee. Tears spilled instantly down her cheeks. For weeks, Lily had whispered that the dog saw her. Now, her mother echoed that truth, collapsing into sobs over the animal's quiet recognition. Marcus observed the scene, understanding that sometimes healing begins not with words, but with presence. Rex had become the bridge again, linking child to mother, silence to recognition. The shelter was plain, the moment unadorned, but it carried the power of survival. In a single gesture, a connection was rebuilt. The story was shifting from despair toward reunion, and it began with the touch of fur. The mother's story unraveled in pieces, shaped by fear and exhaustion. She had endured escalating threats from a violent partner, each one pressing harder against her will to stay. One night, when danger crested too high, she fled. She left with only what she could carry, and the single belief that her neighbor, Dante, could keep Lily safe for a few days. Days turned to weeks. The return she planned never came because every path back felt stalked. Every attempt felt like it would lead her abuser straight to her child. She had chosen absence as a shield. To the outside world, it looked like neglect. In truth, it was survival disguised as abandonment. Marcus listened, heart heavy, realizing her silence wasn't apathy, it was armor. The teddy bear, the signal, the stillness, all of it stemmed from choices made in terror, choices forged for survival, not desertion.
Marcus later showed her the body cam footage, paused on the tiny hand curling into the distress signal. The image was blurry but undeniable. The mother's face crumpled. Her daughter had reached for help the only way she knew, a silent scream in a world too loud to notice. To Marcus, the signal was proof of instinct validated, training remembered, and trust placed in a partner with 4 legs. To the mother, it was evidence that her child had not been invisible after all. Silence had been broken in the most fragile of ways, and yet it had carried across aisles, into cameras, through layers of fear, until someone stopped to listen. Signals are not always loud, not always obvious. Sometimes they are small, hidden inside hands, waiting for eyes willing to see. Rex had seen, and that was enough to pull the story toward hope. The supervised room at the shelter was plain, with beige walls and plastic chairs. Yet it became the stage for something sacred. Lily entered first. Mr. Buttons clutched. She froze when she saw her mother, time folding in on itself. Then, suddenly, the teddy bear slipped from her grip, falling soundlessly to the floor. She launched forward, collapsing into her mother's arms. The embrace was silent, but seismic. All the stillness, all the absence, all the whispers, broken by the sound of bodies colliding in reunion. Rex sat nearby, watching steadily, tail sweeping once across the floor. He didn't bark, didn't move. He didn't need to. Presence was enough. For the first time in weeks, Lily's silence carried weight of a different kind. Not fear, not absence, but relief. The bear lay on the floor between them, no longer the only lifeline she had left.
After the reunion, Rex sniffed Mr. Buttons, circling it with unusual focus. Marcus bent closer, following his partner's lead. Inside a worn seam, he discovered something remarkable. A folded strip of paper, stitched deep within. Written faintly in hurried ink were words and numbers, a contact, a plea. If found, keep her safe. It was the mother's last desperate safeguard, hidden in cloth where only a child's loyalty might preserve it. Silence had not been total after all. There was a voice, quiet and stitched into stuffing, waiting to be uncovered. Marcus unfolded the note, his heart tightening. The bear had carried more than comfort. It had carried instructions of love, hidden survival, a message waiting for someone to listen. Rex had found it, proving once again that sometimes the truth lies not in noise, but in the quietest corners of a child's world. The question remained, what about Dante Briggs? For weeks he had stood as the shadowed figure at Lily's side, too calm, too guarded. Yet when pressed, the truth revealed a different story. Dante had kept Lily fed, clothed, and sheltered. He hadn't abused her, hadn't harmed her, but his silence was dangerous in another way. Probation made him fear authority,
and that fear paralyzed him from seeking help. He wasn't blameless. Silence can harm as deeply as noise, but he wasn't the monster everyone feared either. Marcus watched him sign papers, his expression one of defeat rather than malice. Rex observed quietly, unmoved by sympathy or judgment. The truth was layered. Dante's failure was inaction, not cruelty. And sometimes, failure alone creates danger. Lily had survived despite him, not because of him. The chapter closed not with villains and heroes, but with broken choices and fragile outcomes.
Spring returned to Brookage, bringing blossoms and new routines. Lily enrolled in school, carrying her bear, but also a new backpack filled with crayons and notebooks. Her mother found part-time work at a clinic, supported by counseling and survivor programs. Their life wasn't whole yet, but it was mending. And Dante? Surprisingly, he enrolled in night classes for childcare certification. The same man once feared in shadows now sought to build a future in service of children. It was redemption in small steps, fragile but real. Marcus drove through the neighborhood often, Rex beside him, watching life settle into calmer patterns. The case had closed officially, but its ripples spread across lives. Silence had been broken, and in its place, voices were returning. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't loud. They're small, measured in crayons on paper, homework completed, and a child's laughter heard once again. Weeks later, during routine patrol near Brookage Elementary, Rex stiffened at the schoolyard fence. Marcus followed his gaze. There stood another girl, no older than 6, holding a worn backpack. She wasn't laughing with classmates or running across the field. She stood alone, face pressed to the bars. Then came the gesture. Palm out, thumb tucked, fingers curling inward. The same signal, the same cry. Rex barked once, sharp and low, confirming what Marcus already saw. A chill ran through him. This wasn't over. This wasn't singular. It was repeating, echoing. Another child was asking for help without words, and once again, it was the dog who noticed first. The cycle had begun anew. Silence had patterns, and Rex was trained to find them. Marcus knew what came next. Observation, notes, action. Another life balanced on quiet gestures, another cry waiting to be answered.
The same CPS worker responded, calm and professional, stepping into the schoolyard with authority. Marcus stood back, Rex at his side, watching the process unfold with practiced eyes. The girl's silence mirrored Lily's in ways too familiar. Withdrawn, hesitant, holding secrets not yet spoken. The system, once sluggish, now moved smoother. Marcus had learned to trust the quiet, to read the spaces between words. Rex had become more than a canine partner. He was a barometer for unseen pain. Another child entered the protective system that day, not because of loud cries or visible harm, but because a silent signal was recognized. Marcus reflected quietly. Silence doesn't mean safety. Sometimes silence is the loudest alarm of all. And sometimes the difference between neglect and rescue is a single set of eyes, human or canine, willing to see what others won't. In the weeks that followed, Marcus spoke at the local academy, sharing lessons not written in textbooks. His presentation wasn't filled with statistics or technical jargon. Instead, he spoke about silence, about children too quiet, about dogs who pause longer than usual. Rex sat at his side, calm and steady, a living example of instinct surpassing words. Behind Marcus hung a framed crayon drawing given by Lily, stick figures of herself Rex, Mr. Buttons, and a tall man in blue beneath a bright yellow sun. Across the bottom, wobbly letters spelled, "Thank you for seeing me." It wasn't an official award or a medal, but it carried more weight than anything else Marcus had ever received. Training cadets listened closely, their eyes shifting often to Rex. No one dozed through this lecture. The lesson was clear. Never underestimate silence. It speaks volumes.
Back at the station, recognition came not with headlines, but with coffee, donuts, and a plaque. Officers gathered quietly as the chief presented it. The inscription was simple: "To Rex, who listens when no one else does." The dog didn't understand the words, but he seemed to sense the moment, sitting straighter, wagging his tail once as the camera clicked. Marcus stood beside him, proud but humbled. This wasn't about accolades, it was about acknowledgement that sometimes the greatest contributions aren't loud, aren't flashy. They're found in the pauses, the stillness, the moments when one creature notices what everyone else missed. Rex didn't need medals. His reward was the child's smile, the mother's tears, the safety restored. Yet the plaque would remain, a permanent reminder in the squad room that sometimes the greatest hero walks on four legs, carrying silence into light. One quiet morning, Marcus sat in his cruiser, sipping coffee as families crossed Main Street. Among them, he saw Lily, hand in hand with her mother, Mr. Buttons dangling loosely from her arm. Their steps were steady, their smiles small but real. Rex sat tall in the passenger seat, eyes following the pair, tail brushing softly against the seat. Marcus didn't honk, didn't wave. He simply watched, content in silence. The story hadn't ended with sirens or headlines. It ended with safety, with presence, with the ordinary beauty of a child walking freely again. Rex shifted slightly, pressing against the window as though confirming what Marcus already knew. This was enough. Sometimes the bravest acts aren't loud. They're quiet, steady, unspoken. And sometimes the greatest hero is the one who listens when no one else does. Silence had been seen, and lives were saved.